Good morning. Good morning. I'm really glad to be revisiting this topic of attachment styles. So I want to let you know, my name is Alexandra Stockwell. I'm a physician and an intimate marriage expert, a relationship and intimacy coach, and I love teaching people how to have a really great relationship because having a fantastic relationship is a learnable skill. And one of the ways to learn those skills is to understand more about attachment styles, not as a kind of sentence, not as a kind of permanent description of how you are going to be forever, but as a way to understand your behavior, especially if you are a competent person who knows how to manage yourself in the world. It can be sort of confusing that you feel kind of clingy and needy and desperate for attention with your spouse. It's sort of weird if you're used to being a leader in a more public context, or what you really yearn for is closeness with your spouse. However, you don't actually say anything that would contribute to feeling more seen and known, or having your partner be able to share with you because it's uncomfortable. So I'm sharing some of the context for why I'm talking about attachment styles. And really, I'm going to review some of what I said last week. I'm going to say more. So there are a number of basic ideas in thinking about attachment styles. First of all, the way that we interact with a partner, the way that we interact in our intimate relationships is predetermined until we change it. It's predetermined by how our caregivers interacted with us when we were young children. Because we have, when we're born, we have both physical needs to be warm and well fed and diaper changed. And then we also have emotional needs. And whether our parents are responding to both our physical needs and our emotional needs, whether we're seen, acknowledged, and attended to or not, or it's inconsistent, these are the things that contribute so profoundly to how we then interact with a spouse or committed partner, which is the relationship which, for our unconscious, is most akin to the relationship we have with a caregiver. Of course, the parent-child dynamic is in so many ways completely different than the one between two adult, intimate, romantic partners. But in terms of the degree of closeness, in terms of how well you can be known and know another, that to our unconscious feels most similar in our intimate relationship as it did to when we were taken care of by our caregivers, when our patterns were established and imprints laid on how we respond based on how our caregivers were. So again, there's secure attachment when your emotional needs and physical needs were well attended to, where you could trust that your caregiver was going to attend to your needs, was going to be there for you, not smother you and use you for their own purposes, not avoid you, but be there when you have a physical need or an emotional need. Then your caregiver, or in adulthood, you trust that your partner will be there for you. And sure, your partner may disappoint you sometimes, and sometimes you don't feel your needs are met. That's inevitable. But by and large, internally, you orient to the other person in your life being someone who cares and will be doing their best. And then there is insecure attachment, where you're just not secure that the other person is going to be there for you. And there are 3 different ways that that shows up. There's anxious attachment, which really comes when a caregiver is inconsistent, when they're unpredictable. Sometimes they're there for you, sometimes they're not. And really, no parent is perfect. Like, we're looking at this from the child's point of view, but if you look at it from the parent's point of view, like, of course that's going to happen. You cannot anticipate every need and fully attend to it. That's just not one of the options. So there are degrees by which all of the insecure attachments can be formed. But fundamentally, with anxious attachment, it's because the caregiver is inconsistent and unpredictable. And so then in adulthood, that shows up with a kind of neediness or clinginess and a fear of abandonment, because you never know, is your partner going to be there for you? You want validation, reminders that you're lovable and worthy, because you can have low self-esteem and feeling like you're not good enough for someone to really, truly be there for you. And so you want to get reinforcement, and that can be just stating needs. Please tell me you love me more often. And it can become a kind of clingy obsession where when your partner's doing something else, you feel the attention off of you, and it makes you really terrified that you will end up being abandoned. So that's anxious attachment. Then there's avoidant attachment, which emerges because parents, caregivers don't attend to emotional needs. So someone who has avoidant attachment may well have their diaper changed regularly and their meals at a warm temperature in a timely manner. Like physical needs are met, but emotional needs are not. Whether the parent themselves is incapable, overwhelmed, whatever the situation is, the child learns not to express emotional needs because they're not going to be met. And such a child grows up to orient to being self-sufficient and independent, in the sense that he or she is not going to express their emotions or really pay that much attention to how they feel themselves, because they learned that putting attention on that, expressing that, was just an exercise in futility, and it didn't result in needs being met. So for an adult with an avoidant attachment style, even though they yearn for connection, they may not really have any idea how to figure out what they're feeling and actually share it, because they've learned that that's just a dead end. And so let me just say that if you're with someone who has avoidant attachment style, then when they do share something, you don't want to be emotionally overwhelming, like, oh, I'm so happy you told me that, because it's too much. The key is to be well calibrated, but even a little bit of sharing should be honored and acknowledged, because you want to positively reinforce that it is safe and that it is for a good purpose when they share. So even something as simple as, I love this lasagna, from someone who's got avoidant attachment style, you want to say, oh, I'm so glad to know you're enjoying it. I'm happy to know that's how you feel. And you don't have to make it a whole big thing, but you definitely will make it easier for your avoidant attachment style partner to share themselves with you if you can notice and positively reinforce in this way. If your partner has anxious attachment style, it will never, ever get old saying that you love them and that you appreciate them and that who they are is wonderful. Like, you can even just put it in your schedule to do it every day you will create more harmony in your relationship if you want to do that. Now, with someone with disorganized or fearful avoidant attachment style, somebody heard what I shared last week and reached out and commented, yes, it's true. I didn't say where that comes from, so I want to now. Someone who has a caregiver who basically inspires fear ends up with disorganized or is likely to develop disorganized attachment style. So what that means is that if your caregiver is a source of safety and takes care of your needs, but also is a source of fear, then that gets to be very confusing. And when I'm talking about a source of fear, I mean because the caregiver is abusive in any way, either towards you or towards someone else, and you witness it. This essentially breaks the trust with the caregiver. And in adulthood, what this can look like is really, really wanting connection and intimacy, but being afraid of it, being sure that when you have it, it's going to end anyway. You can't trust the consistency and ongoing honoring of you. And so someone with disorganized attachment style often self-sabotages and ends a relationship early so as to avoid being hurt themselves. Now, if your partner has disorganized attachment style, one of the most important things you can do is consistently be safe. So if you're in a position to do this and it's genuine, to just say frequently, every day, it's safe with me. You're safe with me. I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe with me. Or if maybe I'm not going to hurt you, that you can't promise. I'm not going to ever intend to hurt you. You're safe with me. Now, in going through the attachment styles today, I've shared kind of what each one is and where it originates in caregiver behavior and how to be more successful to reach your partner with that attachment style. However, if you know me well and how I approach relationships, I shared that because so many of you have questions, and it's really important to know how to nurture your relationship by being successful with your partner. But really, the main place that delight and sensual connection and warmth and laughter are going to arise is if you handle your own attachment style. So if you have anxious attachment style, it is your job to access feeling good without looking to your partner to provide that for you. So maybe you make a menu of things that you can do to feel good, or you write yourself a letter when you're feeling wonderful about yourself and read it when you have questions. In other words, develop positive, self-empowering, sovereign habits that will give you that validation you're yearning for without becoming needy towards another person. It is incredibly empowering to handle your own emotional truths. If you have an avoidant attachment style, then what you really need is courage. Courage to open up at a pace that works for you, a teeny little bit at a time. Maybe you could first just start paying attention to how you feel and give yourself grace, because that's not the easiest thing for anybody, but especially for someone with avoidant attachment. And there are four main emotions: happy, sad, angry, and afraid. So you can just ask yourself, if you have an avoidant attachment style, any given moment, am I happy, angry, sad, or afraid? And you can start with just knowing that for yourself. And when you're ready, and not one moment before, you can share with your partner that you're feeling happy, sad, angry, or afraid. And that that will bring you so much more of what you want in the way of connection at a pace that you can manage, so that you're well calibrated each step of the way. Yes, it will be uncomfortable, but it will be manageable. And if your partner has an avoidant attachment style and starts doing this, all you need to say is, "Thank you so much for telling me. I'm glad to know it." That is you contributing to someone with avoidant attachment style, understanding that their emotional needs matter in your relationship. And if you have disorganized attachment style, then start looking for evidence that there are people in your life you can trust. It might even just be your mailman, if your mailman comes and is friendly when they drop off the mail. It might be one of your siblings or a friend. It's going to be hardest to learn to trust that with an intimate partner, but not impossible. But you need to evolve into being someone who trusts the experience while it's happening, rather than anticipating that the problematic behavior is right around the corner. So this is really an overview, but it's so juicy and helpful to become aware of what it's like inside your soul. You already know, but to give language to it and be that much more aware is definitely the first step to evolving into new ways of connecting and feeling harmony inside you and between you and your partner. What your questions are, what are your takeaways? Do you think about attachment styles? One person says, as a disorganized person, how do I handle times when my anxious partner seems needy? Okay, well, ideally, what you would do when you're both feeling more comfortable, more connected, just more at ease, and your anxious partner isn't needy and you're not in a time of self-sabotage or feeling that you can't trust, that when you have a moment like that, to actually have a conversation together and find out what each of you need. Because maybe there's a way that your anxious partner can interact with you in that moment that is going to be more successful for both of you. Like, are you someone who wants less talking? Or would you like to express that you're with your partner just physically, like giving a hug? Is that something that would work for you? Like, really think about, in terms of an activity or talking or touching, which of those are you most available for when your partner is feeling needy? And similarly, to find out from your partner, which would be most comforting. Because if your partner, when needy, really wants verbal affirmation, then maybe you write something verbal, like, I love you and I'm really glad we're in this relationship together. And then when you feel like your partner's getting needy, you just cut and paste it. You don't need to, in the moment when it's a little overwhelming and uncomfortable that your partner's being needy, you don't need to put your attention on them, override your own experience and respond, or hide or break up because it's too much when you actually want to be with the person. But if you have one or a few different ways of responding that you can just go and cut and paste. Then you can have your attention on cutting and pasting, but you're giving something generous to your partner. So let me know how that sounds, if that's something that you can imagine doing in your relationship. Wonderful. Welcome, Julius.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very well and happy to converse with you. Tell me what you're thinking.
Well, I'm just to tell you, and I don't mind sharing with the group. I'm in process of a second divorce, and I'm on a journey to find out what happened and what I can do to change. And the thought or the concept of attachment styles is so new, and to me at least, and just learning what attachment styles are, and thinking back to my past, the caregivers, and how it can impact how I love somebody or show up for somebody every day, and how I want them to show up for me every day. So I'm trying to figure out what attachment style I have. But I do know that the disorganized attachment style was, as now, this thing I didn't know about my second spouse is, just, and I'm wondering, I never had an expectation of being divorced. I think, and I remember reading in your book, you said, you didn't think that, and at the beginning that, coming from a divorced family, that everlasting marriage was possible. And, to have you explain how it can happen is just, it's mind blowing. I don't need to, I just feel like I don't have to read anything else. And I'm so grateful to you for your path that you've taken to help people understand that it is possible. That what I had with my parents. My parents loved each other and were hot for each other to death do them part. That's just, it was so good to understand that. And what my father taught me, what he said was that a real man loves his, dedicates his life to his wife and his children. But he didn't have any boundaries for what happened. And so he died, Dr. Stockwell, he was just financially broke. He was emotionally broke because he gave and gave and gave and gave to everybody. And, that's how I've approached my marriages, where I didn't have boundaries with how somebody showed up for me, until it just got to the point where I was just fed up and say, I didn't hold it in. I talk, I'm an expressive person. And so I'm asking questions. And when somebody says nothing's wrong, but they're not showing up, I don't know what to do with that. So I guess that culminates into a question. I'm trying to learn how to be good to myself as I love somebody. That,
I think
that's kind of my question.
It's a beautiful, beautiful question. And I'm really grateful for everything you've shared. And let me just ask one question. Are you already living separately, or are you still in the house with your spouse?
Oh, no. We've been separate for a year.
Okay. So this is my guidance. And I just want to say that anyone who's watching, who's in a seemingly solid, successful marriage, I only say seemingly because you never really know unless you're actually in that marriage. That's the only reason I qualified it. But what I'm about to say would apply in that situation too. But for you, if I ask you right now, maybe even close your eyes, no one's going to know the difference either way, but can you summon in yourself how it feels to be loved well by someone else? Like, do you have access to that feeling in you?
I do. I do. Ironically, it was with my second to be divorced wife. It was our first 2 years of our marriage it was like a utopia. And at least for me, I can't speak for her. It seemed to be, but I
Okay,
can
well,
I can bring that in. I know what it feels like to be loved. I have that type of, I can imagine. It's in my imagination, and I can bring that in. Yes.
okay, excellent. So I also just want to say, where you say I can't speak for her, you don't need to. Like, your experience belongs entirely to you. So even if she had a different experience, that's not important right now. So I highly recommend that you make this part of your everyday experience, that you, whether you close your eyes and do it more as a meditation or just as you're, I don't know, walking through your day, that every day you bring up the feeling of being loved well. And I encourage you not to connect it with the woman who will be your ex-spouse, to just focus on how you felt. Because the more that you tap into that feeling, the more likely that you kind of recalibrate, so you recognize when that's happening and you're less attracted when it's not. Does that make sense?
I mean, that is so that is so good. I mean, that's you're tapping. I'm going down that road of the imagination and making sure. I mean, I'm sorry, the subconscious mind is learning how to use my subconscious mind to bring into current existence that the things that I want to live out as a happy person and having a happy life. So, I mean, you have just just really hit it. I mean, this is phenomenal. The answer that you gave me. It makes me so happy. I'm just outgoing. I stay for the most part. I know every day is going to be those challenges that you don't like in the day, but hey, I can do the best I could do. And what you just said was just the most wonderful thing. I'm so glad that I'm on this line and being able to interact with you personally.
Well, I'm so glad too. It's a vulnerable, beautiful question. And I love that the answer really spoke to you. And just because we're recording this, I want to say a little bit more. You yourself don't even need it, but I am going to say a little bit more, which is that when you evoke this feeling that we're talking about, then you're becoming more sovereign. You're not looking for someone else to fill a void. However, someone else can meet you there and add to it. So having a next partner is absolutely wonderful, but there's a way in which, in caring for yourself and evoking that feeling like we've been talking about, it's almost like giving signals to somebody else about how to love you well. And either they're going to lean in and be interested because that's the way they want to love you, or they're going to feel it a little bit as a repulsion. So it's almost like raising your hand and saying, this is the way to love me, but it's all happening in the energetic, invisible realm, which it's still very, very real, of course.
Yes, yes. And let me close up by asking this question.
Sure.
Now that I understand the disorganized attachment style, and I've heard many people, and just listening to people, like for example on the Clubhouse app, and people just have this belief that nothing's going to last. and they do living where somebody self-sabotage something that was just so real, and you're wondering, why are you throwing our relationship away? How can I, you may have already responded to this, how can I respond to them, helping them understand what they're doing? If they have this self-sabotage, this can't be true. This is too good to be true. So let me just do something to mug it up, so that, because he's going to leave anyway. So I might as well just help him leave. And that's kind of the way I see it. And, I've seen, and I've just heard so many people say, well, it's going to end anyway. So I might as well just help it. How do you either, I don't know, say, set your boundary or help them understand what they're doing?
I have two responses, and I think one is more understanding and one is an action, and it's something that you could certainly say to others. And that is that joy, pleasure, honestly, even sorrow, the kind that you feel and can then let go of, those all happen in the present moment. And anxiety and being fearful, part of both avoidant attachment style and disorganized attachment style, those are not actually based in current reality. They are based on a fear of what will happen in the future. So for someone who is in that situation, it can be very, very helpful to do something that's actually somatic, like yoga or breathing exercises, just anything to stay in the present moment, because in the present moment, things are good. And the self-sabotage really comes from having a fight with something which isn't even happening. Does that make sense?
Yes. And so when you're saying doing something like a breathing exercise or yoga or something, that would be for me, or that would be for the other person?
No, that would be for the other person. For someone who's about to self-sabotage, one of the most powerful things that they can do is get into the present moment and more connected with the current reality. Because the self-sabotage is to avoid a hurt in the future. It's like getting ahead of yourself. That's what self-sabotage is.
And then basing the future on what happened to you in the past, how does that?
Yeah, it's basically interacting with the future based on the past. And for someone who's caught in that trap, one of the best ways out is to become friends with the present. Because in the present, things are going well, but that's much easier to say than to actually do. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that I want to say, which is less about advice to give somebody else, but more just to have compassion and understanding and have it be really relevant for absolutely anybody who's listening, is that all of us have glass ceilings of many kinds. So glass ceiling, it's typically used in terms of women and their salaries in the workforce or promotions, but we have glass ceilings. Glass ceiling is really not the right metaphor, but it's the one that's familiar, so I'm going to use it. Like, we have glass ceilings on how much pleasure we can experience. After a certain amount, it's just too much. And we have glass ceilings in how much love we can feel, and in how much love we can give, and in how much support we can receive in practical and other matters. Like, we all have a kind of a set point in how much abundance is comfortable. You know, like, we see this with the people who win the lottery. I forget what the statistic is, but it's like, it's I don't remember exactly, but it's something like 90% or high 80s of people who win $1 million or more in a lottery, how within 5 years they're broke. That is because it's just overwhelming to receive that much. And so while we're talking about this in terms of a disorganized attachment style and self-sabotage in a relationship, for someone who doesn't at all identify with having disorganized attachment style, there's still something very important about being in the present moment and learning to expand our capacity for more of what we want. That is just a beautiful, worthwhile thing. And for you, in the future, when you're next committing to someone, you may have to expand your capacity to believe that a forever, really nourishing, well-boundaried love is available to you. So I know on the one hand, I'm saying be in the present moment, and now I'm telling you something about the future, but it all ties in.
I understand totally. I thank you so much for allowing me to share. And again, I don't mind other people learning from my pains, and so this is just wonderful. I mean, just the thought of imagining being loved is a very, very helpful jewel to take away from this session. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm so glad, and I thank you for your generosity that so many others can benefit as well. And keep me posted. For anyone watching, to join the Aligned in Hot Marriage live coaching program. It is coaching just like this with couples who are in committed relationships who want to go from good to great, how to bring more emotional connection and more sensual passion. The invitation stands for everybody. And with that, I'm going to close out this session and thank you all for being here. And again, really warmly invite you to join me in the Aligned in Hot Marriage live coaching program for more and more and more of this sort of thing focused on your own relationship. See you next week.